My name is Philipp. I'm a small hoster from Russia. Now I will tell you how you can make your DNS server with this DNSSEC support. Unlike many other presentations I saw, we will not use utilities, show the consoles. You can do it on your own if you want. We will not detail and see how the encoding is done, which software libraries are used. You will do it on your own or will not do it. You will apply ready-made utilities, but unlike those presentations, I even tried to explore many English-speaking presentations and haven't found anything similar. But we will see the full picture, how it looks like from outside, from the perspective of DNS server. A half a year ago, in the network, on the web, I uploaded the operator's guide, what the register had to do. This registration is quite easy with the detailed description of all the procedures and processes. And in Russia, we have a problem. Now we have 2 registrars that support this sector, about 30 of them. And I say them, dear guys, I did it in Russian, a detailed operator's guide with the softwares, with the libraries, and just take it, and after 5 minutes, it's ready. And the registrars answered that we would like to have a comprehensive service, a full window for the DNS server to support it. But it has quite a complicated part, and we don't understand it and are not willing to do it. Therefore, I had to develop the DNS operator's guide. Unlike the registrar, if you make DNSSEC on the server, it's quite complex. That's for sure. It is very complicated. It is costly, and there is nothing easy in it, and the price of your mistake is very expensive. If you make a mistake, all those zones you sign, they will stop to exist, because continuously it requires maintenance, it requires collaboration with the register if you are not a register on your own, and through some outside persons you need to collaborate, to interact, and you may have some problems. A few practices and the best solution, they are unique solutions. Coopera, for example, they establish their own server, and probably that they will provide it to you. But on the other hand, you understand, if you try to do something with a simple DNS, it's quite complex as well. Quite recently, I tried to create a software, a program, avoiding the servers and taking some records, and I abandoned this idea and pick up the ready-made solution, CNEM, because this is very difficult. No practices, no fully ready solutions, and therefore you have to start from scratch. Legacy, because DNSSEC changed since 1990s. Several times it changed, and because of that, it is quite complicated. In a few words, how DNSSEC operates. If we do not understand this, it's very difficult to discuss how the server can be made. All the records of the zone A and all other records are signed with the system of the electronic signature. And accordingly, the parent zone is confirmed by what these records are signed with. Where these records are located, it doesn't matter. There is such a difference with the hierarchy system of DNS, from where a person takes these records, it doesn't matter actually. There shall not be a particular server where these records are kept. And accordingly, the DNS operator requires to sign, re-sign it, observe it, and transfer the information upwards to the parent zone. A very important aspect, I didn't invent it myself. The term which you see it here, I didn't invent it. I just translated it into Russian. There is such a model available right now. Registrar. No. Vice versa. Register, registrar. In English, it is called registrant. But in Russian, we call it the domain administrator, using the classical terms. And there is also, you quite probably understand this, that the domains are served by some hostess or some outside persons, third persons. So eventually, there are 4 entities in the chain, and DNSSEC support requires ongoing changes in the parent domain, meaning that hoster operator has to enter the register, and it is not an administrator, and quite always, mostly, it is not an administrator, it is not me, and therefore there is a term, the domain operator. The Canadian register introduced this from them. I heard this term for the first time, and I like it a lot. And now let's quite briefly, quite fast, I will not detail, but let's try to have a look how DNSSEC operates in pictures with cats. It's very simple. In the zone, the key is published, the key is signed on its own, and it signs all the records. And we eventually get this picture if it is done with one key. A very simple method. The key signs itself and all the records as well. There is such a term as KCK, when with this key you can sign other keys. But there is a different type of key which cannot sign itself. But these are the details. We have a technical hiccup. The signature can be done with 2 keys. The key is published, and zone signing key is published. The key signs the keys, but the zone signing key signs the other zone. In our case, it is extremely important because I will refer to the signing with 2 keys. Why? Because the update of the key with which you sign zones, does not require any upwards actions, no interaction with the registrar, with the operator. And you can update it several times a day in theory, but any update of the key that signs other keys requires messages and collaboration with the registrar, and it can be done manually or through some rotation of the key. Otherwise, it will be very difficult. Therefore, I will refer only to the situation with 2 keys, because the security in 2017, these 2 keys to ensure security, safety, this is quite a difficult matter to discuss. And it looks like this. With 1 key, it signs itself and other keys, and the other one signs only the zone records. a very nice picture, by the way. And indeed, now we have signed everything, and now why do we need all this? After signing, we need to understand what has been signed with what key. So we must understand that this signature is correct. A parent have a link to this key, and we follow this track upwards. It looks like this in the picture. We have a key which signs the other keys, and there is a sign which goes to the parent zone. DS record, unlike other records, DNS records, is located in the parent zone. The records for domain is located at an upper level. No other records does this. This is an exception from the standard. And in resolvers, they have the root keys posted, and we trust the chain that goes from the root. If we do not have this root key, then we will have nothing. We will receive nothing. Generally, they are encrypted, but today they are automatically uploaded. They are automatically updated, and quite probably you've heard that there was rotation which was cancelled, and in the near future there will be a verbena. Why it happened? That is the complete trust chain up to the top. I provided this picture, simple picture with the simple hierarchy of the domains for you to understand it easier. And the resolvers goes downwards. It just explores how they operate downwards. And accordingly, we can sum it up. What, if you want to make your DNS server, what is required from you to sign the zone and constantly update it. We will discuss it a bit later, why you need this. On an ongoing basis, you need to create the keys for signing the zones, rotate the keys for signing the zones, and transfer this information to the top. And by the way, information transfer to the top is the most difficult part, because if you work with different registrars, inside the domains, there is registration with different registrars. There are some situations when you have to work with them separately, and every registrar has its own internal regulations and rules. And this is the most important part, by the way, why I say that it is difficult. You will have to observe it on an ongoing basis. Always there will be some software, some monitoring, some errors and mistakes can be made, and the service, the unit which will have to observe it, otherwise you will lose the coherency. I will not detail it here about the maintenance of the root key, rotations with the roots, because this is a different issue. The webinar will be held on that. We will not talk about the rotations of algorithm between different methods. That is another topic to discuss. If you failed to make DNS server, quite probably you will not face it in the future, and actually you do not have to face it. But if you face, then you will read relevant documents on your own. Let's start from the servicing. A clock, because always it's very important to observe the time, and you need to keep it in mind that there is the precise time. If someone plays any musical instruments, it will be easy. For me, it was quite difficult. I'm not good at musical instruments. How the zone is signed? It is signed with a set of records. I do apologize. I prepared the guide, and it was quite difficult for me to jump between the guide. The microphone is not on. Now it's on. It was very difficult for me to jump from the guide and the pictures, but you do not have to read the text. I will brief you. What is the signing of the records? Records, they are aggregated in some sets. In many guides, you can see a mistake in these sets. For example, co-player says that they are the same type records of the zone, but it's not actually true. All the records of the label, the same type records from one label, and label means domain. And this is the way the records are classified, are grouped, and this part is signed with the key. And accordingly, the signature is put into the special signature, record of the signature, and these records are compulsory. RNSIC is always there.
Thus, KSK signs keys, and ZSK signs everything else. This picture is very important. I singled out the subdomain. We need to keep that in mind. Second point is that there is a certain life cycle of the signature. Unlike all the DNA time cycles, there is an absolute time or life cycle of the signature. It's expressed in WTC. If you don't re-sign it, you will lose the coherence. And you need to consider this and watch this, otherwise you won't be able to get it. The choice of the time is of the life cycle is also very important. It needs to be more or equal to the signature or the maximum signature of the zone to torture yourself. It's clear from the picture if you do it like it is shown in the picture, then based on the standards, the resolvers will cut down your life cycle. Based on the life cycle end of the signature, it will stop existing for you. This will be virtual for you. It will be cut down at the end. If you have your signature bigger or equal to the TTL zone, you have a real TTL then. I told you about the life cycle of the signature. I'll now tell you how to select it. There's a number of options. There are not many of them. We need to focus on DNSSEC allows to change the replies, substitute replies. If somebody is using the signed signature, signed record, then the person can attack even if your signature changes, even if your record changes, and the maximum life cycle of the signature needs to consider this. Unfortunately, we cannot make it 60 seconds or 0. There must be a certain digit. In 2017, it should be a small one, small figure. If you know that your zone signature or zone record changes once in 10 years, if it changes more often, then you can use almost any signature. Why you shouldn't put it at 60 seconds? Because If something goes wrong, you need to have time to wake up, to take a pill for what you took the night before, and solve the crisis. If you don't have time for this, you lose coherence. I repeat myself, the life cycle of signature needs to be a couple of times more than the signature life cycle. When I was writing 70 slides, I learned it by heart, but apparently we need to have twice as many slides to keep it for longer. It's clear about the absolute time now. The picture I showed you earlier, I redrew it. How is it done in practice? The absolute time and of the signature gives as a bad consequence in the way that resolvers are not always synced, and sometimes the time is there's a big difference, time difference that you need to consider, because if the resolver uses the time that is before or after the point you need, it will not give the domain. It was saying it's a fake, and there's no such domain. Not all of them, but majority of the ready-made solutions that produce signatures produce certain shift backwards, and when you renew them, there could be a shift ahead, forward, or shift forward. Usually it's an hour. If it's more than an hour, then the resolver will not consider this option. I converted the presentation to the PPT format, so we have misplaced letters. Another point is that if you have same signatures for all the records, it could happen that some resolvers, like those that aggregate the Google Open DNS, they will come to you simultaneously for all the records, because they will have the expiry date at the same time. TTL will coincide there and overlap, and for every record they add a certain randomized shift, so that they all time frames in the zone will not overlap. Thus, now a few words about refresh. Refreshment of the system refreshment. You need to consider the corrections beforehand, and also the checkup period. It's better to do it much in advance, because something goes wrong, you need to have time to do something about it. If you don't have time for it, you will lose the coherence and of your domain. I'll send you the presentation PDF, a very good readable one, PDF, and then you will be able to read the text. This is how it looks, the whole process, the life cycle of the signature. We do the full picture. I put a standard signature period Because majority of the utilities will ask you how much do you want your signature time to last. There's different settings. Most of the utilities make a small correction, but they start with a signature life cycle, which is never the same. Just like I said, signature look needs to look like this. Signature zone look needs to look like this. I think not all utilities support this. Usually it's a service that automatically signed it, or binder can some tricky way do this. Look, usually utilities signed in a regular way. Some random changes, but as soon as you change the IP address of the domain and tell them that I have a new file zone and need to sign it, and just like you know, the time you told it to, it resigned it. The best way would be if you had change in a record, you need to resign it and leave everything else, so that they will not come to you all at once. If you have tens of millions of requests coming to you a second, a minute, you will not. In our modern technology allows to ignore this shift. But when you grow up, or if you have a weak server, better do it like this, like the side slideshows. But very few people do it like this. There's a room for improvement, a room for choice. Another issue here to discuss. It's hard to solve it. There are several options for it. I counted 4, but they're all bad. They don't work. You have a request for the domain you don't have. You've been asked about the subdomain, but you don't have this domain. What do you do? As I said, the DNSSEC means you have a signed zone, not a signed server. The DNSSEC does not involve the identification of the server. It also involves the consistency of the record in the zone. What to do then? Well, secondly, you have a asterisk sample. What to do with it? You have a domain request. You don't. You replied, but you cannot have. You cannot sign it. If it's dynamic, it's not a problem. If it's not dynamic, then it's a problem. They do it like this, like a special NSEC record. It's called NSEC security, which is given to the negative reply with the code of saying that there's no such domain. Special record says that the domain it replies to goes before the domain that does not exist, and the domain it refers to, it follows it. So you have the cycles of NSEC records. So it's listed in the additional reply. If you look through the protocol, you should know where it comes from. But there's a problem. By placing these records, you publicly open your whole zone to everyone. So any person can bypass your zone and learn all your domains, by hand. It's clear from the picture. Per, Within a few seconds, this person may have all your list of domains in the pocket. If you cite it non-dynamically, this problem is not solvable. I made you another slide, which shows that if you asked for the BBB domain, or you made a request for a BBD domain, you have the following reply. You get the same thing when you get a reply when you have a domain, but you don't have this type of record. If you don't have this type of record, you get a NCC security reply saying that there is a domain, but signature is issued for the domain. But it's even more interesting with the asterisks, with the wildcard. There you have a forged reply for the signature with a signature for asterisks. The label gives you what you asked for, and the signature is given for the sample. And the additional section, you get an security record for the asterisks. And the reserver needs to understand that you forged the reply and it substitutes the asterisks and checks whether it's true or not. I'm dwelling on the negative reply because it's very important. Something needs to be done here. If you asked about the settings, you just setting up the system, you asked what to do with this or that and security. You need to understand why it's done. At, it's in the past, because you can bypass the zone and look through it, the third and security version was issued and published, which very much like the first one, but uses the hashes instead of the domain name. The hashing algorithm is known, and resolvers may check that there's a negative reply between the two signatures issued. There's a problem in 2017. It was deciphered by available utilities within 3 seconds, and the third version of the security will not give you everything. You just won't be able to check it by hand. But I don't know how you, if you're not afraid of vicious hackers, if you're not a bank, but you don't really want to show everyone your file zones to everyone, but then it makes sense to install the third version, because it would be difficult to see it by hand. But if you're a bank, your zone will be bypassed. Just don't put anything important in that zone. What can give something important to the hacker, or sign it with some different methods that we'll talk about later. I told you about the third version because if you decided to use it, the utilities will be asking you in parameters or requesting for certain arguments. It's supposed that you can solve the hashing, and in 2017, as I said, especially with the blockchain that now what is now popular, it's usually hacked within 3 seconds, and changing the salt and applying algorithms is useless. You'll simply waste your time. Same is true about the hashing gateways. If you you live in a cold country, wanna warm up the room, you can install hundreds of gateways and can be hacked within 100 seconds. So it's useless. Some people recommend to install 10. Why 10? I don't know why it's a number from somebody's had. Another option is a opt-out flag. It's only used for big zones that refer to which have a lot of NS records. And if you host in domain.com and you have 10 millions or 100 millions, I don't remember the number, and you have 1 million only signed, assigning everything will be strange, not strange, but would take too much time. You have a 1 gigabyte file, well, that's okay, but it will be too long a process. So there's a very interesting, very cunning algorithm how not to assign all those references. I don't think you need it. You just need to know that such a flag exists.
After the coffee break, I will show you a PDF version because Microsoft PPT is hacked up. I have summed up everything I voiced. If you pick up my PDF report, you will accordingly have the text with what I have said here. And SEC Security 3 and SEC Security 3, this is a DNS protocol, UDP, and UDP is accordingly small packages from UDP. They try to use it. If they fail, then they try to connect from CCCP. There can be some cuts or some hiccups, but the speed is quite slow, and you get nothing good from that. And most interestingly, I'm just criticizing this, but actually I use it on my own. I sign the back zone of my hosting and I use it, but historically I read some guide and automatically put NSEC Security 3, and it still lives in my system. And I'm not afraid that some IT experts will bypass it somehow. And now, a bypass which is done by many persons. Here we have the documents, 3 of them. A bit later, I will have a link to the third one, the most recent one. If you sign not the zone fully, but use a server or your software, like Cloudflare does, then you can sign the replies immediately. You receive a request and sign the reply. Not pick up the ready signature, but the reply. And for that, you can use the NSEC security and make a reply. You can create non-existing domains, which will be in the negative reply that was requested. And this way, here I wrote down in a simple way, NRC make a more complicated algorithm of calculations of these exterior domains, very difficult not for them to overlap, to be very fast, not to match, and accordingly you can use this, and this is used, by the way, and Knot can do this. Similarly, Power DNS can do it, and Cloudflare and actually they boast about this. Why NSEC? Because this way, from the third version, but with the first version, you will have smaller replies because of the characteristics of the specification. You will have a smaller reply. And by the way, there is another aspect to highlight here. I have missed it. With the third version, there is quite a funny thing that these domains are hashed. This is a hash of the real domain to prevent your bypass of the zone and to understand which domains you have. There is such a funny thing that there is a document on NSEC Security 3. It is very large, and it includes a large section about what you can do if you have a hash from some domain which matches the real existing domain. A very smart and intelligent algorithm which can do all this, but the third version tried to correct something, but eventually, while it was developed, the technology is developed, and now it's senseless, but it caused a lot of troubles and problems. We have discussed this signature, more or less. Now we have a lot of time ahead, therefore I will talk a lot. Most importantly for us to remember about the signature is the times. This is the most important thing. Why many DNS domains expire. Why? Because the validity of the signature is not put. We do not re-sign them. After the expiration of the validity, it just failed. Now we will talk about the key rollover. Key rollover is a security aspect. If you are not a bank and if someone is not willing to influence the elections in your country and you accordingly have a DNS or some election website, then no one will hack you directly, and that you have your keys posted somewhere. They can stay there for many years. There shall be large companies, hacking companies, to detect them, to hack them, and therefore key rollover is not so important. It is more important to update the keys. And now the next section of my presentation is key rollover. It's quite simple here because you mainly manage it, you fully control what you do with RFC, where you put it. Everything is under your full control. You do not have to interact with anyone. You are not dependent on anyone. In keys, there is no time of life. Most of the presentations I heard, read, or explored while preparing, everyone says that there is time of life of the key. Key has no time of its life, unlike the keys, different keys. In HTTP protocol, there is the time of certificate, but actually most people do not even think how it operates. But please remember that a key has no time of its life. Subject to one condition, there are such softwares which set this time. And therefore, there is such a myth which is well developed binding server with DNSSEC support. The time of the key is set. All the times are set there. And if it signs the so-called smart signatures or automatically, then it observes this metadata. And if your key in its version expired, then you will lose consistency, connectivity to your domain. But they are binding systems, but in reality, there is no time of life of the key. It can be long-lasting, endless, and those systems that done it automatically make it long-lasting because there is only one need to change it if it is stolen. But if it is not stolen, you can encode it again, and it can be endless then. The time of the key could be different from other records because you will not roll over the key, quite probably once a month. On the other hand, I will not recommend you to distinguish, to differentiate these times of life, because if you have one time of life of your records and the keys, then your brains will fail. After you do this, you can play here, but initially I recommend it to make it uniform and similar. Again, if you are not playing with the time of life of other records, because yes, quite yesterday, for the other presentation, I looked through the records of the register of the abolished websites in Russia, and I found out that there are a lot of domains with the validity of 60 seconds. 60 seconds, within 60 seconds, you will not be able to send it out in domains or addresses or resolver that will not be able to finalize the check cycle fully. But it doesn't matter, by the way. Another important thing, and this is for the next key, that DS signature, which is sent to the parent, its validity is very large, and there is a large dependence on the register, on the registrar, and you must check what it does with that. Quite often it is stringent and robust. In Russia, for example, for Russian domains, it could be up to 4 days. And you have to cope with that somehow. You must know this. Rollover, what we can do here. Rollover of the zone signing key, it has the following characteristics. There are several methods, RFC, which describes the rollover, but I believe that you do not have to select a method. It's clear why all the others fail. If there is double key method, when you put a new key and with 2 keys you sign everything. Your zone will be extensive, your replies will be very extensive since it will have 2 signatures, and no one needs this. And since you fully control the zone signing key and you can do everything to it, generally they publish it when it is in the system, in the web, in the network. Then, accordingly, after that, they sign the zone signing with a new key, and it gets obsolete. But when the time of the records of the second key expires, it is just removed, deleted. And accordingly, this picture, I like it a lot, because you will find it, you will not find it almost. And this is the time of life of the records plus something, plus some seconds, a few seconds, or TTL of the key itself. And the time of possessing is practically the same. They are not quite different, but the only thing is that here you need to understand that in many cases, please know this, if you read some documents, RFC documents, to some extent, actually I understand why it is so way. They go from the end of the period of validity of the key, which they are assumed to know. The time of the life of the key is set, and they start reading it from the end, saying that you need to update it in some time before the end. But the key has no end. It's endless. If you don't have it in your system, the brains will fail because there is no end actually, and no proper calculations can be done. Therefore, everything is simple. You define for yourself, according to your parameters, the time when you believe it is high time to roll over the key. For example, it is stolen, or you suspect it being stolen. You publish the key, wait for some time when all the resolvers take it, wait for some other period, and after that you resign it. And from that time, after the resigning, and you have the new signatures available, you start calculating this period of possession, because this is the point which sets the start point for the calculation, not from the end, but from that point. The key is endless, but the time when it is needed to be deleted, to be removed, is calculated from that point, not from the end. You add TTL, and I wrote it down. I've just forgotten again, 2017, it is done instantly, but please remind that instantly is done in our heads. The technologies, the time of spread, if you have some secondary servers, the time of spread should be taken account. It could be milliseconds, but if you delete the records a few milliseconds before, then the connectivity to the domain will be lost. And therefore, the time shall be calculated and estimated very precisely, because what I said, I have forgotten that there is the time required for the spread among the domains. Therefore, if we make this DNSSEC, these pictures shall be in front of your eyes, and you must check and examine that we took into consideration everything and done it precisely. If you do not write utilities on your own, most of them will not provide you a chance to forget this. They will warn you, and you will look at that time, starting to think what time it is. Oh yes, this is the time required. And here I put down the effective time of the key, but please remember, it has no time. You can calculate for your own which effective time you would like to have, during which your key will be functional and operational. For the key zone signing key, generally it can be 1 month. Generally, it is 1 month. If you do not believe that your key can be endless, it's quite normal. Your effective time could be endless, unless you find out that it is stolen. Key rollover, which are the point of security of the key signing keys. Here, everything is complicated. Firstly, the most effective and fast method is quite the opposite one. Unlike the zone signing key, that is the method when you pick up 2 keys, you get the second key, the new one, which is published, and with the 2 keys you sign everything. But some problems are that it requires double collaboration with the registrar, and you win quite a little time through that, but key as key rollover is dependent on the time of the life of DS records, but DS record time is quite large, is quite long, and the rollover time can take a few days, a week, a month, a few months. There are some zones, domains, which the register says that the records should be kept for 1 month, and then your rollover of this key will take more than 1 month. Your system must remember about this, and it should never forget about that. Therefore, for 2 weeks, I have been exploring the documents, the methods, even though RFC recommends a double key for KS key, but I believe it is senseless since it complicates everything, but you win, you get a very little benefit out of that. And accordingly, it looks similar to your zone signing key, apart from one thing. You need to post your DS records. And accordingly, DS records, with them you have problems. The time when you sign everything with 2 keys is dependent whether the parent posted it or not. When you roll over the key, you must monitor the parent. Always do this. And after you are sure that the DS records you put at the top is posted on all the parent servers, only after that you can calculate the time of retention. It's clear from the picture. When you roll over the second key, you sign it with 2 keys. Since KS key signs the records of the key, you will have a double response, and accordingly, when everything spreads over, this blue interval is the time of the life of DS records, indeed. And again, for it to be ripe on all the resolvers, only after that everything will be fully operational.
And then when you place information, you need to sit down and monitor. If it was placed, when you do it through IP, by IP, if many automation systems allowed to do this, at least one automation system allows to do it. It monitors what happens with the parent. It counts down the time. What I told you here, I wrote it down. When you have published the key, you have one more problem. Publishing is good, but because of the root key rotation, for you not to get into the time when the key is rotated, there's a very complicated dependency. I just believed it when I read it. It's recommended to believe that if you publish the case K, the time for it to spread is, or it's either the key itself, life cycle, or an hour, depending which is more, which is longer, because it depends on the rotation of the root key. It will overlap, coincide once in 10 years, but it doesn't matter. The effective time of the key for signing other keys for security point is usually a year. Well, I've taken it out from my head. You can do it in indefinite. If unless you're a bank or a president website, if you do it indefinite, making it indefinite is not so bad. You understand what the security problem is. It is that something is stolen from your servers. Does it often happen with you that somebody steals something from your server and deciphers it? Once again, I want to meet the people who decipher a key, a cell key. If such people here, want to meet them, as soon as they're a person like this, the whole system of the world will fall down. So if it is indefinite, it's not so bad. There's another point. There's a there's a standby key option. You publish a standby key, and it is lying there in the zone for indefinite time. Unless you use it, since you're not using it, it's very hard to steal it. If you decide to quickly rotate something, you understand that your main key is stolen or deciphered, and there is such a person I want to meet that deciphered your key, then you may resign the zone with the new key. You don't need to make this complicated rotation. Your keys were well known to resolvers. It was published a long time before that. You just replace the key. It's more difficult with the case key. It needs to be part of the signature, so the new key needs to. You can only make a stand-up key one way. Place two DS signatures with the parent and sign it. But the parent name must have two DS records, but it doesn't always happen. And, you will have a double signature, which is not good because it will never fit into one reply. A few words about security. I said this word quite often today. You can read about this in many places. So if you are looking at some ready-made system working with DNSSEC in service, they say that keys need to be kept in protected place. The problem is that if you keep it in a special protected place, you add an additional abstract layer of complication to your system. Usually this protected place is a so-called program for holding the keys. For 15 years I still haven't understood what keeping keys in the hard drive and a special program differs. Some people recommend to input password every time by hand, but it's not so fast. But once again, in 2017, you can make a transparent security system, hoping that if you get something stolen from you, you will be able to rotate your key quickly. And I also share this opinion. You shouldn't keep your keys away too far from yourself. It complicates everything. You need to separate the system into secret and non-secret place parts. It's better to have an effective and very quick key rotation system. Keep the keys where you keep them, and to dynamically sign the replies. I'll tell you more about this dynamic signature after the coffee break. Thank you. come again, I have a lot to tell you. Any questions? I haven't finished yet, but you are free to ask.
Фил, несколько
Few questions to you, Phil. I have more later. First, simple question. You said you already have a DNSSEC in your hosting. As I said, I have it in the signatures of IPs. I sign the reverse zone. Why don't you sign the main domain zone? It's another point. You know answer to this question? In Russia, for a month we're two registrars who have DNSSEC support, and I don't want to deal with any of those. We own two more registrars. Shall we discuss this issue further? Because I sent. You've seen this report for 2 times already. 2 times. We have a special guideline for the registrars. This guideline is for me, and I have a special guideline for you as a registrar owner. Another question to you, Phil. If there is a registrar that is of interest to you, if you have a client who wants to get a hosting domain from you, are you planning to sign automatically your clients if they buy everything? To some degree, it was a guideline for myself, not a report for the ENOG. The signature of the reverse zone is made with the help of scratches and sticks. It works very well, but it is a single zone that I control. It doesn't work the same for the clients. I need to understand which registrar they work with. But what if a client comes to you and wants to work with your hosting? For myself, I wrote a guideline on how to do it, because the crutch that I have for myself now will not work for the client. When I started working with things for the clients, I understood that there are problems that I discuss and things that I raise after the coffee break. For example, if I host in one zone, I will not have to shift the reverse zone between the servers. But it's the problem with the clients. The client is working with a competitor, but switches to my domain.
хотя бы те домены, которые читаешь, чтобы не было хотя бы доклады читаешь везде, чтобы сапожник без сапог.
Естественно, но сейчас я такой.
But maybe you should start with yourself. And the last question, do I understand it right? If DNSSEC worked at the client side, if you wanted to work at the client side, the client's reservoirs need to support the DNSSEC technology. There is an answer to this question. Let's acknowledge the fact that we have only one resolver, 8888. It's implanted in the Docker and many OSs. You install something, you already have this 8888, and Google checks the DNSSEC. I'm saying globally there are service of the providers, and they need to support it, but the support on the side of the resolver is very massive now. When I was creating the signature of the reverse zone, only a year ago I made key rotation and resignature. Before that, I forgot to resign it and did it manually once a month. And when I forgot it to resign it, I learned about it because my mail stopped leaving, stopped working. The utilities. I don't really understand. The soft need to support it. The soft in the operating system doesn't have to support it because the OS, majority of the client settings, they're using some cache and DNS service. It's enough for the DNS server to check it. If you want to use some specifics of the server, look, for example, use not the system of SSL certificate, but they use it through DNSSEC, special technology, then yes, your browser needs to support this and need to know how to do it, and it can't do it now. So my concrete question is how much currently it is safe to subscribe the client to DNSSEC without their knowledge. Is there a certain research, very often used by Alexa and some others? You need to look into resolvers. But subjectively, I can tell you my opinion. I don't have the data, statistical data, but I can tell you that I learned about my failure to resign the reverse zone within 2 hours because my mail server stopped working. I'll answer the question, not the one you asked, but the ones you meant. If you make a mistake in signing the zone, people will notice it. Let's say that we have 10,000 visitors and 10% of the 10% failure of visitors will not be noticed. DNSSEC does not replace the DNS. If resolver supports the DNSSEC, it will work perfectly. I think it will be my last question. Alexa, million of websites of it. Is there a research? How many of the popular websites support DNSSEC? There may be some statistics like this, but I don't have it. Maybe I know that the 2014 domains is assigned with DNSSEC. I have information from Roskomnadzor. Of the domains, how many of them? I think it's 60,000 of domains out of the 60,000. 2014 assigned. I can tell what it is. It's the domains that are owned by whom? By Kulin. They automatically signed them. You put a tick. Well, it means that. But so how does the work integration with the registrar work? It is a difficult question. I don't know. They have a guideline on how to do, but statistically, of how many sites they sign is not available. I only check the reply of my resolver. Let's have a coffee break now and come back to the difficult questions like transfer. Thank you.